Being able to record an event and play it back at a later date is something we do without thinking too much about how the images got into our cell phones. But what about when those images are ghosts walking through walls of a 12th century house and you're a part of the movie? Stick around, that's our second story. Is it at all possible that everyday inanimate objects such as stone and brick can record and store sounds and images that can be played back at random? It is an intriguing question, and if true, the subject could provide answers to many of the claimed ghost sightings and hauntings that have been recorded for many years. Thomas Charles Lethbridge, a British parapsychologist and archaeologist, originated the stone tape theory. Lethbridge proposed in 1961 that electrical mental impressions emitted during a highly traumatic or emotional event, such as a murder or war, may be absorbed by surrounding objects such as damp rock and stone. Lethbridge hypothesized that these visuals, like the sounds and images recorded on magnetic tape, may be replayed repeatedly for many years under specific conditions. Since 1961, this theory has become a popular explanation for many recurring sightings of occurrences that were previously classified as ghosts or hauntings, despite the fact that there is no scientific explanation. Scientists have never been able to prove that objects like stone or granite can absorb sounds and images, let alone have the potential to replay them repeatedly. Imagine going back in time 200 or 300 years, pulling out your cell phone and showing some stranger a video of you playing baseball or riding your motorcycle. Boy, would they freak out. But think about what you have just done. You've stored sound and images onto a device with a silicon chip built in and replayed it at a later date, or earlier date, or whatever. But stone and bricks don't have silicon chips, do they? Well, silica may be the most well-known mineral in the world of rocks. Quartz, jasper, amethyst, chert, flint, citron, chalcedony, and tridymite are only a few of the various types of silica found on Earth's surface, and these are just the crystalline forms. Silica, silicon dioxide, is the second most abundant material in the planet's crust. It's everywhere. So if the silicon chip in your cell phone can hold memories, can Earth's fabric hold them too? One argument against the stone tape idea is that we currently live in a world surrounded by concrete, stone, and bricks. We can't travel 50 meters in most towns and cities without encountering anything composed of these materials. If, as Lethbridge stated, these gadgets may capture catastrophic occurrences, wouldn't we see many more of today's horrific disasters replayed? Take the 9/11 attack on the Twin Towers, for example. Well, the flip side of that argument is, we as humans may still be at a very early level in our development and comprehension, with little to compare ourselves to in terms of our progress during our time on Earth, thus there is still a great deal to learn and find. Science has not discovered the answers to all of the world's puzzles and riddles, and what we assume to be true now may be proven erroneous in the future. And that brings us to the first of our two stories. In the small town of Kenfig, Mid Glamorgan, Wales, there is a pub called the Prince of Wales. The inn itself dates back to around the 15th century and was previously known as Tai Nuid, New House Tavern. It was renamed the Prince of Wales in the late 18th century in honor of George, Prince of Wales, who was crowned George IV in 1820. During 1982, the landlord of the inn reported some paranormal occurrences after he had locked up for the night. He stated that once the pub was locked up for the night and he had retired to his living quarters, he could hear organ music being played in the pub area, despite the fact that there was no organ, as well as sounds of merriment, the clinking of glasses, and loud talking in an old Welsh dialect. The landlord would, of course, go to the pub area and inspect it to guarantee that no one had broken in. But once he arrived, everything was calm and secure. Two gentlemen learned about what was going on at the inn, and with the agreement of the landowner, agreed to do some experiments to determine what was creating these weird noises at night. John Mark, an electrical engineer, and Alan Jenkins, an industrial chemist, visited the pub to do an experiment that had never been done before. They connected electrodes to the bar's stone walls. So one night, they set up their equipment, which consisted of electrodes, estimated to be around 20,000 volts, being fed into the stones of the pub's wall and then connected to some audio recording equipment. The gentleman then left, the pub was locked up as usual, and the landlord went to bed. The next day, the two men returned to the inn to see what results they had discovered from their experiment, and to their surprise, they discovered that their audio recording equipment had picked up the sounds of organ music, a clock ticking. There was no organ or clock in that room. And even more surprising, they heard people speaking in an Old Welsh dialect, just as the landlord had described. Although doubts have since been raised about this evidence, the two gentlemen concluded at the time that the sounds that had occurred in the inn over the years had been recorded in the very fabric of these old stones, just like recordings on magnetic video or audio tape, and that these recordings were somehow being played back at night when the inn was all locked up and quiet. On this occasion, it appears like the stones of the inn's walls have absorbed the sounds of merriment and joy that have occurred over the years. And at night, these noises are somehow repeated and can be heard not only by the human ear but also on tape. But is it only sound that can be recorded within the stone and brick of a structure or any other item? Or can visual events from the past be recorded for replay several, if not hundreds, of years later? This structure was once the home of the treasurer of York Minster, who occupied the building from the 12th century until 1539, when Henry VIII men stole the minister's possessions during the dissolution of the monasteries. Not long after, the property passed into private hands and was completely reconstructed throughout the 17th century. Nonetheless, parts of the ancient building can still be found in the house's cellar, and that's where this story begins. In the cellar of this property in 1953, a young apprentice plumber named Harry Martindale experienced a scene that would change his life forever. He was climbing a ladder in the cellar when he heard the sound of a distant trumpet. His confusion was compounded when he heard the trumpet again, this time much closer and coming from behind him. Turning around, he was surprised to see the head of a horse emerge from the wall behind him, followed by the remainder of the horse's body and a ghostly rider clothed in full Roman soldier regalia. Young Harry was so taken aback by the apparition that he fell from his ladder to the floor. While sitting on the floor and looking up, he saw around 16 soldiers, all of whom were cut off at the knees. He described them as all walking with their heads downcast, giving them a gloomy aura of utter dejection, and their appearance was grubby and disheveled. After the soldiers had traversed the cellar and vanished through the opposite wall, Harry got himself up and fled the cellar in terror. By accident, on his way out, he ran into the building's curator, who took one glance at Harry's horrified expression and remarked, "You've seen the Romans, haven't you?" It turns out that Harry Martindale was one of many people who saw the same ghostly patrol of Roman soldiers in the treasurer's house cellar. Later investigation of the property revealed a portion of Roman road about 12 inches beneath the cellar floor, which explains why the soldiers Harry watched were cut off at the knees. So, was what Harry Martindale and others claimed to have seen a replay of Roman soldiers retiring from a lost fight, recoded in the stonework of the old Roman road, to be replayed hundreds of years later? The narrative of what Harry Martindale and many others witnessed at York's treasurer's house is intriguing in that they all saw the same thing. The same occurrence continues repeating itself to various people. So, is the stone tape theory applicable to this property? Has the stonework that built up the old Roman road recorded the events that occurred hundreds of years ago, and is now replaying the sound and vision of the event whenever someone is present to witness it? This idea also raises the question of whether only stone and brickwork are capable of recording occurrences such as those described in this video. There have been several accounts of objects being haunted. Therefore, might an object made of clay or wood have the structure and ability to capture an experience that may be replayed later?